All right, let's talk about potash. This is the bread and butter if you're in central Saskatchewan. So what you see here is potash. Now, what if you look at this rock here? This is potash. Now, is the white part the potash or is the pink part the potash? We'll talk about that. So here is where you can see the depth chart of potash. This is how far down it goes until we get to it. So here is here is the potash. This is at about 3,000 feet, which is 1,000 meters, a kilometer underground. Now, what's above this is evaporites here. So this is salt. So what do you think probably formed potash? A bunch of water. So these are some potash samples here. Now, one thing that's really cool, you don't need to know this, but it's kind of cool. You have an incredibly rare chance of getting blue potash. It's very rare. This is in Lanigan. You can go see this rock. So, generally speaking, this here is a cross section of Saskatchewan. So this is it. We took a Saskatchewan. Now imagine I take a little slice. So I'm just going to take a little slice right here. I'm going to move this up and you're going to look at it like this. That's what this is. So this here is a prairie evaporite profile. So we can see that the potash here is this lovely stuff. So this is all, so here's Manitoba, here's Saskatchewan, right? So here's the Belle Plaine one, here's Saskatoon, here's Esterhazy. So it's, here's like Regina, so on and so forth, right? So that's what it kind of looks like. So you need some vocabulary here. So write all this down. All right, so potash is a general term that covers several types of potassium salts. The most important is potassium chloride or sylvite. Sorry, I'm just grabbing my sample. I left, unfortunately, the samples I was going to talk about in my other bag. So I have to make do with the samples I have at home. So let me just make sure I can see my own. So this here's a chunk of potash ore. So really, really pink, right? White. First off, yeah. It's like licking pure salt. Tastes awful. So what is this? Which part is the potash? The pink part or the white part? The white part is. Now this pink color, it's very distinct. And we assume that this is what potash is. That is actually iron oxide in it. So the white part is actually the part that's the potassium, the sylvite that we want from there, okay? Now, one thing that's really interesting is China, they want the pink. But pink is a sign, the pinker a potash ore is, the less quality it is. It's still good quality here in Saskatchewan, but it's not as great as this side is a better quality than this side. Okay? Because it has more of that sylvite in it. So, why would China want the pink stuff? Well, even though it's lower quality, generally speaking, just superstition. That's what the farmers are used to. So they're like, nah, no, that's wrong. So what we do, we take the good stuff and we add some color into it. You don't need to know that, but just kind of interesting. All right, so you do need to know these, so write this down. So why is potash so useful? There's only a few countries in the world that have it. It's because it's essential for plant growth and is the main component of fertilizer. And I'll talk more about this a little bit later as to why it's so essential. But the four main producers are Canada, Russia, Belarus, and China. Those supply most of the world's potash. Without it, people would starve. Hundreds of millions would starve. Saskatchewan supplies 35%, a third of all the world's potash. So why is it so important? Because there is no substitute. This is the part you got to write down, the top part. For the bottom stuff, you don't need to write this down. But remember, there is no synthetic substitute. The world's only potassium source that we can add to plants is potash. Okay? That is why it is so, so, so important. So this is how much produced, that millions of tons that Saskatchewan has produced. So in that's an easy number here. 2017, we produced 20 million tons. For every 1 ton we produce, we'll talk more about this in the royalties part, but Saskatchewan gets about $12. So if I produce 20 million, sorry, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I get $12 for that. That is 200, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, $240 million in revenue that the government saw just from potash in 2017. But we also get royalties on top of that. So Saskatchewan gets a lot of money from it. The price of it increased dramatically during this time. Anyone know why? What happened here? What happened here? We got the COVID-19. We got the COVID-19, but also we have Russia invading Ukraine here, which these supply, Russia and Belarus invaded Ukraine. So we've lost 2 people who produce most of the potash. So the only place left to buy is Canada. So we had the same supply, but we had much more demand. That means price goes up between COVID-19 and that. All right, so you do need to write this down. So the largest potash mines in the world are from Saskatchewan, and we usually dissolve the potash and pump the solution to the surface. So we have 2 solution mines, that's what this is solution mines, and we have 8 regular dig mines. After a potash is mined, it is then processed in a mill where they separate it. So write all that down. Saskatchewan gains $2.4 billion in taxes and royalties every year from potash. It employs about 6,000 people, which fuels another 12,000 jobs. Think local restaurant owners, people who just have to come and clean the uniforms, security guards, cooks, EMS trainers, so on and so forth. So the average salary of these employees is about $115,000. So again, this is where all of our mines here kind of are, right? It goes in that little diagonal loop. So potash is about 1,000 meters underground. And again, we have 2 things. Make sure you get that down. So conventional mines is where you mine it with a large drill, and I will show you that in a second. You might be able to see one of those here in a couple weeks. We then take the drilled stuff and we send it along a conveyor belt. It then gets brought up to the surface by a shaft, and then we mill it to process it, and then we sell the finished product. So again, giant drills, basically. Now underground, it's very hot, 28 degrees Celsius. Why? Well, here's our lovely Earth core. Here's our surface. If I go down, I'm closer to the core, so it gets hotter. So this here is an example of one of the rotors. So drills usually have 2 rotors or 4 rotors. Oh, Sorry, here's the fourth one. 3, 2, 1. So they literally go in, it's diamond tips, and it literally just scrapes it away. And it goes on a conveyor belt here. Isn't that beautiful? Here's the iron oxide, here's the pure sylvite, and so on and so forth. But you can really see at this point how it evaporates. And you can see here there's like little clouds of like almost like salt. So it's very salty in the air down there. Um, mm, you've already done this. You do need this bottom part though. Some of the rock is left to provide natural support. I can't just keep digging and digging, right? I need to make sure the shaft's not going to close in, because what's going to happen is this ground, right? So imagine I have an underground here. Here's my shaft. Now I have pressure coming in from the left and from the right and from up top. What happens? Yep, yep. This is what happens. So this ground will eventually concave in a way. It'll shift. So the ceiling doesn't move. The ground does move. Eventually, it's too narrow for a person to pass by. So they have to be very particular to have that natural support. So once we get it up to the surface, we are now in a mill. Now, don't let this dissuade you. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 levels in this thing. It is a very tall operation. Now, how do you think they extract the potash? I'll give you a hint. Look here. What do you see? Our good old friend, water. How did I extract the uranium? I mixed it with water and I scooped the stuff I didn't need away. It's the same process, baby. So I'm going so write this down. I'm going to so we to mill it, I need to crush and grind. Where's my oh my God. So I'm going to crush and grind the ore to separate the potash from the waste material, right? I don't want that iron oxide. This turns it into 4.5 millimeter balls for brining and floating. So we use water and other chemicals to brine the material, just like how I might brine a piece of pork. This makes that potash separate from the other materials by becoming hydrophobic, and it floats to the top, right? So if I just have a giant tub of water here, the potash is just sitting at the top. So all I got to do is scoop the top away. I can't use water because it would dissolve the potash. I use a solution, a brine for it. What is a brine? I literally use salt water. So it floats, I collect it, and then I dry it. First I spin it, then I put it through an actual dryer. Let me show you this video actually. This is it. So you can see here's the actual process here that happens. So we get ore from the mine, it goes crushed in season. Now it goes in two things. So the large chunks are broken into an impact. So there's there. So we remove the clay, it gets floated, goes to tailings, and then it all comes into these. So once we've extracted it, we go to these debrining centrifuges, which spins it and dries it. It gets sized, and then it either gets stored, it gets compacted, or it gets crystallized from that point onwards. What about a solution mine? Well, generally speaking, here's my mine, but there's too much water in here. If you have a conventional mine which gets flooded, congratulations, you now have a solution mine. That has happened in Saskatchewan. One of our oldest operating mines still flooded, and so they had to turn it into a solution mine. So I pump water into the ground where the potash is. That dissolves, not water, but I use heated brine. So that dissolves the potash, and then I suck it back up. This is more expensive, which is why it's not preferred. So again, conventional mine, I go into the ground, I drill it, I send it up. Solution mine, I send brine down, I dissolve it, I send it up. Don't need to talk about that. So here you can find all the different types of products here. This is what I wanted to show you. I have these all. But you can see here, it's all white, right? So the white is the pure stuff. That's the good stuff. Delicious. Now, in Colonsay and Esterhazy, why are they orange? Well, this is the stuff that we send to China because they like it that color, right? There's a superstition involved there. They like it that color. So they add the color. And so you can see here as well, there's different qualities of it. In a standard one, you might use this for fertilizer. In a regular one, you would use this for like ice melt and fertilizer and water softener. In high quality, you might use it for piping or pharmaceuticals or household products. And then in fine quality, you might use it for like a fuel, for example, or for fertilizer as well. So there's different forms of it, is really where it is. Now, finally, there are 3 fatal flaws which will kill a mine. You don't need to worry about writing this down. But fatal flaw 1 is that the potash itself just isn't good enough anymore. It's not good enough to make money. There's not enough of it. But number 2 is that we've done something wrong in our post-depositional alteration, aka I messed up the extraction. Number 3 is the mine's integrity. Maybe it floods. Maybe it's too deep. Whatever it is. And then finally, number 4, technology. A machine breaks down. So those are the 4 things that will end the production of a mine until it gets fixed to get back up again. All right, so that is potash.